All right. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah.
So today we're going to be talking about Plef.
Oh, yeah. Plef.
You guys sent in a ton of great sources about him.
Yes. Tons of great stuff.
So Felipe Cabral, a Uruguayan graffiti artist and rapper, also known as Plef.
Right.
And it seems like there's a lot more to his story than just, the facts of the case.
Right. It's not just a simple, open and shut case.
No.
There's a lot more going on.
Yeah. It really is about a life that was cut tragically short.
Yeah.
His art that, continues to resonate today. And then this quest for justice that feels like is still unfolding.
Absolutely. It's very intriguing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Plef, he wasn't just an artist.
Right.
He was a true force in his community.
Yeah. And his work,
Yeah.
the sources you send in really paint this picture of someone who is just exploding with creative energy.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. We're talking prolific graffiti art.
Yes.
His tag Plef was everywhere.
It really was.
Rapping with groups like Mudgy and Negra Squad, he was even into baking bread and community gardening.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah, talk about a multi-talented individual.
Yeah, and it wasn't just that,
Right.
It was the spirit behind it.
Yeah.
He was just a very humble, inclusive person.
Right.
He could connect with anybody
Right.
from all walks of life.
Yeah, and his friends' descriptions of him
Oh, yeah.
are just incredible. Like,
Well,
one of them said that he could, quote, give a loaf of his homemade bread to someone hungry.
Right.
And then in the next breath, talk about revolutionary ideas like free electricity.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, you really get the sense that he
Yeah.
truly lived his values.
Absolutely. And they shine through
Yeah.
his values in his art,
Yes.
especially his graffiti.
Yeah.
There's a story about this tag he did on a bank.
Okay.
And it's a simple message, but so powerful.
Okay.
It just says, because of banks, poverty exists.
Wow.
He wasn't afraid
Yeah.
to use his art to challenge the status quo.
Right. And that kind of makes the circumstances surrounding his death all the more unsettling, right?
Very much so, yeah.
So, okay, let's talk about what happened.
Yeah.
February 16th, 2019.
Okay.
Plef is taking pictures of his graffiti in Punta Gorda, a wealthy neighborhood in Montevideo.
Right.
And he's shot and killed.
Yes. And the prime suspect in this case is this elderly neighbor, someone who's very involved in Vecinos en Alerta, like a neighborhood watch group,
Okay.
known for being very hostile towards anyone he thought was suspicious.
Hold on. So in this, supposedly safe,
Right.
upscale neighborhood with
Right.
all its surveillance,
Look at the cameras.
someone is murdered
Yeah.
in broad daylight, and the prime suspect is part of the group
Right. It's crazy.
that's supposed to be keeping the community safe.
Exactly.
Something doesn't add up here.
It doesn't add up at all. It gets even more disturbing, too, because the gunshot probably came from inside the suspect's house,
Oh, wow.
which means Plef was probably targeted specifically.
Wow, that's chilling. And
No.
you can really feel the frustration
Oh, yeah.
in the sources that you sent in. The murder weapon was never found.
No.
The suspect died of natural causes before the investigation could be wrapped up.
Died of natural causes.
And there's just this overwhelming sense that justice was never served.
Exactly.
And, that raises some important questions.
It does.
What does it mean for a community when an artist, someone who represents inclusivity and challenges inequality,
Yeah.
is silenced in such a violent way?
It's a big question.
What does it say about the system when it seems unable or maybe even unwilling to provide answers?
Very true.
That's a really heavy thought.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about the aftermath,
Yeah.
the ripple effect of this tragedy.
Yeah.
The sources you sent in describe this huge outpouring of grief and anger,
Absolutely.
especially within the artistic community.
It was huge.
But there's also this inspiring sense of determination to keep Plef's memory alive.
Yes. And it's more than just remembering him. It's like continuing what he did.
Right. Yeah.
There are these annual concerts. They're demanding justice for him. And they have new murals and tags popping up all over the city.
Mm-hmm.
Even in places where his work was erased.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this wave of art and activism. And they're refusing to let his voice be silenced.
And, musicians like Fernando Cabrera and Levernoy Carrero have dedicated songs to him.
Yeah.
And there's this really poignant detail at Plef's former elementary school.
Oh, wow.
They repainted the walls, but they left one of his signature cat tags untouched.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's like this silent tribute.
It really is. It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it makes you think about the context of all of this.
Yeah.
Plef's murder happened when anxieties about crime were rising in Uruguay.
Okay.
And there was this tough-on-crime rhetoric that was gaining a lot of traction.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
He's killed in a wealthy neighborhood,
Right.
one that prides itself on being safe and secure.
Exactly.
Yet no one is held accountable.
It's unbelievable.
It feels like a direct contradiction of this tough-on-crime narrative.
It absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder who these policies are protecting and at what cost.
Right.
And that brings us to Plef's family,
Yeah.
who've been fighting tirelessly for answers
Yeah.
and accountability
Right.
since his death.
Yeah. And their story is just heartbreaking.
It is.
They've been very vocal about their feeling that this case was mishandled,
Right.
that there was a lack of political will to really solve it.
Yeah, they haven't been shy about that at all.
And there's this unsettling detail that a police officer claimed to know the killer's identity, but the lead was never followed up.
That's crazy.
It speaks to a system that seems to have failed Plef and his family.
Very much so, yeah.
I can't imagine the frustration and the pain they must be feeling.
Oh, it must be awful.
They're not only grieving a loss, but they're battling a system that seems determined to sweep this under the rug.
It's really sad.
Yeah.
It points to a larger issue that might be at play here, too. These tough-on-crime policies, they're supposed to create security,
Right.
but they might just be masking deeper societal problems.
Right. Yeah.
And leaving communities feeling vulnerable and distrustful
Yeah.
of the systems that are supposed to be protecting them.
Yeah, it's like a vicious cycle.
It is.
And in the middle of it all
Yeah.
is this vibrant young artist, silenced forever.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
It is.
Right. And we've only just scratched the surface.
Right.
But before we delve deeper into the second part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want to ask you, what's resonating with you the most about Plef's story so far? Is it his artistic talent, his activism, the injustice of his death, or something else entirely? Keep that in mind as we continue our exploration.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, it really is amazing how this story, even with so many unanswered questions, it still manages to spark these deep reflections.
It really does.
We've got this incredibly talented artist who is deeply connected to his community and his art. I mean, it reflects his values and this passion for a better world.
Yeah.
And then, out of nowhere,
Yeah.
this senseless violence
He's crazy.
surrounded by mystery, and it's all playing out
Yeah.
against this backdrop of rising social tensions and political
It's
rhetoric.
fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like Plef's life
Yeah.
and death almost become this unintentional reflection of like all the complexities within Uruguayan society at that time.
Yeah, it's like holding up a mirror.
Exactly.
And, it makes this deep dive so much more than just a true crime story.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're grappling with issues of justice, inequality, freedom of expression, and the impact of these fear-driven policies on everyday people.
On everyday people, yeah.
It's about so much more than just one man's life.
Absolutely. And we can't overlook the personal stories, too.
Right. Yeah.
All this stuff that you sent in. His friends recounting all these anecdotes about his personality,
Yeah.
his quirky sense of humor, his dedication to his craft.
Yeah.
It really brings a human element to this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
And
it makes his loss even more poignant.
it really does.
Yeah, there's one story in particular that stood out to me.
Oh, yeah.
It was about Plef taking this spontaneous trip to Chile
Oh, wow.
with a friend,
Yeah.
just on a whim.
Really?
It really highlights that adventurous spirit he had.
Yeah.
Always open to new experiences, always wanting to share those experiences with others.
Exactly. And even in his art,
Mm-hmm.
you see this playful side to him,
Yeah.
this desire to engage and spark conversation
Yeah.
rather than just lecture people.
Right.
Remember that story about him tagging this spot with shoe polish?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it ended up exploding, and he was covered in this stuff.
Oh, my gosh, yeah. I laughed out loud when I read that.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Like, even when dealing with serious issues,
Yeah.
he didn't take himself too seriously.
Yeah, it shows a real humility,
Yeah.
this willingness to laugh at himself,
Right.
even while tackling these really important topics.
Yeah, it's a good reminder for all of us, right?
Absolutely.
And then there's this recurring theme of Plef being a unifier,
Right.
someone who could effortlessly bridge different worlds.
Yeah.
He was as comfortable rapping in a basement club as he was painting a politically charged mural on a bank.
And that makes his death even more jarring,
Yeah.
This wasn't a guy who went looking for trouble.
Right.
You know, he wasn't confrontational.
Yeah.
He was about building bridges, fostering connections,
Right.
using his art to start conversations.
And yet he becomes the victim of this act of violence
Crazy.
that seems rooted in fear and division.
Right.
That us versus them mentality.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of everything he stood for.
It really is. It's like a cruel twist of fate.
Yeah.
And I think it's a big part of why there's so much anger and frustration still surrounding this whole case. You know, the sources you sent, they talk about this feeling that Plef's death was not just this personal loss,
Right.
but it was a blow to like the whole community
Yeah.
that he represented, the values he stood for.
And that feeling is amplified by the lack of closure.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
5 years on, the prime suspect is dead.
Right.
There's this sense that the investigation has hit a dead end.
It's a dead end.
Yeah, for his family, it's an open wound.
It is.
You know, they're not only grieving a loved one,
Right.
but they're grappling with a system that seems to have failed them in the most fundamental way.
In the worst way. Yeah.
And we hear about their, relentless efforts to get answers, meeting with officials, the frustration with the lack of communication and transparency from the authorities.
Of course.
It must be exhausting.
It must be. And then there's that detail about the police officer.
Right.
Who claimed to know who did it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't do anything about it.
It's unbelievable.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? It raises some serious doubts about, the authorities' willingness to really investigate this.
It's like they've run into a brick wall.
Yeah.
A system that just resists change and accountability.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's a tough pill to swallow, especially considering,
Right.
The broader political climate in Uruguay at the time.
Yeah, this is where things get really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Because Plef's death becomes intertwined with this bigger conversation about crime and security and the rise of all those tough-on-crime policies.
Right. See it everywhere,
Yeah.
in the media, in political statements, even in how this case was initially presented.
Yeah.
There was this focus on where it happened, this wealthy neighborhood,
Exactly.
as if that somehow made Plef's death more shocking
More important, right.
or more deserving of attention.
Exactly.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
The very neighborhood
Right.
that was supposed to be so safe.
Right. All the surveillance.
And secure.
With its cameras and all its residents, it's where this unsolved murder takes place.
It throws that whole tough on crime narrative right out the window.
Right out the window, yeah.
It makes you wonder whose safety is really being prioritized here.
Exactly.
Was Plef seen as an outsider, a threat, just because he was creating art
Yeah.
in a space where he wasn't supposed to be?
It's a good question. It forces us to confront this reality
Yeah.
that fear-driven policies, they often target marginalized communities.
Right.
The people who don't fit into this neat little box of what's considered acceptable.
Right.
And safe.
And in Plef's case,
yeah.
it's a young, politically active artist
Right.
expressing himself through graffiti and rap who becomes the victim.
Right.
It makes you wonder if his art, his message, even his presence was somehow seen as a threat.
Right, because he was challenging the status quo.
Yeah, and that's precisely why this deep dive is so important.
Absolutely.
It's about so much more than just solving a murder.
It really is.
It's about understanding the societal forces that might have contributed to this.
Yeah.
The impact that this has on an entire community.
Right.
It's about examining how we talk about crime and safety.
Exactly.
And who benefits from these narratives.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's about challenging our own assumptions about people based on their art, their background, how they look.
Yeah.
And it's about recognizing the power of art as a
Absolutely.
form of resistance, a way to challenge injustice and keep a memory alive, even in the face of tragedy.
And as we head into the final part of our deep dive,
Okay.
I want you to think about this.
Yeah.
How does Plef's story resonate with what's happening today,
Yeah.
both in Uruguay and around the world? How do we navigate these really complex issues of social justice and artistic expression and security in a world that seems increasingly polarized?
Right. Yeah, it's incredible, how even with so much left unresolved, Plef's story still manages to spark these bigger conversations.
It does.
It pushes us to look beyond just the headlines and really dig into the complexities and acknowledge these systemic issues that often lead to these kind of tragedies.
Yeah, his case, in its unresolved state,
Yeah.
almost becomes this catalyst for something much larger,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And it's so inspiring to see how his friends in the artistic community, they refuse to let this lack of justice, stop them.
Right.
They're keeping his memory alive.
Yeah.
And they're continuing to push for answers in these really powerful ways.
The sources are full of examples of that creative energy,
Yeah.
Murals, songs, concerts, events. It's all dedicated to Plef. And the fight for justice. It's like his art became the seed, planted in the hearts and minds of everyone who knew him. And now it's blossoming in these unexpected ways.
It's almost as if by silencing him, they inadvertently amplified his message.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There's this quote from one of his friends that really stuck with me. He said, "We have to keep pushing forward with culture because they're trying to drown it."
Wow.
There's this incredible determination to not let Plef's voice be silenced, to use art as this tool against apathy and injustice.
I think that's where the true power of art lies. It transcends barriers, it sparks dialogue, it challenges the status quo, it inspires action.
Right.
And in Plef's case, it's become a way to heal, to remember, and to demand accountability.
And, it's not just confined to Uruguay either.
Right.
Artists and activists around the world are using their platforms to raise awareness about Plef's case.
Yeah.
And they're connecting it to similar struggles for justice in their own communities.
It speaks to the universality of his message,
Yeah.
The fight for justice and the power of art as this vehicle for change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life and legacy of Plef,
Okay.
I want to leave you with a few things to think about. First, take some time to explore Plef's art online.
Yeah.
Listen to some Magia Negra Squad.
Yeah, check it out.
Maybe even learn more about the ongoing efforts to seek justice for him and his family.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And second, think about how his story might inspire you to use your own voice, your own talents, to advocate for the things you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
We all have the potential to make a difference.
We do. Never underestimate the impact of one voice, one act of creative expression.
And finally, just remember that even in the face of tragedy and injustice, art has this incredible power to heal, to connect us,
Absolutely.
and to ignite that spark of hope.
And maybe, just maybe, by seeking justice for Plef, we can start to dismantle those systems of fear and division that continue to plague so many communities all over the world. We can choose to embrace the values that he embodied: understanding, empathy, and that belief in the power of art to bridge divides and build a better future. That would be a legacy truly worthy of his name.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Plef.
Of course.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep creating a